This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
I just received a letter from a student who thanked me for instilling the love of math in him. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a very special welcome back to two guests, each of whom has been on at times before, but probably never together. So we're glad to have you. Senator George Barker began serving in 2008, Delegate Joseph Yost, 2012, representing different portions of the state, from the Southwest to Northern Virginia, two different parties, two different chambers. But some of the issues that you all have worked on have been very similar, so I thought we would start with some mental health issues, and then we can get into other issues that you are dealing with, and we'll let our viewers know we're having the conversation before the scheduled adjournment date on March 12th. By the time they're seeing it, it will be in that time we expect before the reconvened day in April. But Senator Barker, since you started your service early, we'll defer to you to begin, and then
Sure.
Joseph to jump in, and let's have some conversation starting on mental health issues.
Yes, well, actually, Delegate Yost and I worked together on a lot of things over the years.
Right.
And one of which was the Virginia Health Workforce Development Authority, where he's been chair and I've been vice chair of that since 2012, when we both got appointed to that. But we've also worked on a number of other issues collectively, including mental health services. And we're both on the Deeds Commission, the commission that's been operating over the last 2 years and has two more years to go to reshape the entire mental health system. What we're trying to do is to build up the services in the community, decrease over time the real need for major facilities, those types of things, by developing the community resources to help people get treatment earlier, to help get them that treatment over a longer period of time. I was fortunate this year in being named to the Senate Finance Committee, which deals with the budget. And in the Senate budget that's now been adopted, and right now, as we're speaking, there's not been a final budget worked out between the House and the Senate, but presumably there has been by the time you're seeing us. But we did add a fair number of additional, a good bit of additional funding for mental health services, including some for children's mental health services, some for some crisis types of things, to try to help people get better care earlier. We are not one of the leaders nationally in terms of our mental health system, so that's what Joseph and I are working on over this 4-year period.
Joseph?
Well, I think Senator Barker is absolutely correct. The Commonwealth has made a lot of really good strides over the last almost 10 years now, I think, in the mental health system, especially in the wake of what happened at Virginia Tech on April 16th. There was a lot of legal changes. The big issue that we faced in the last probably 4 or 5 years, though, we've really done as much code change as we can. It's come down to a matter of dollars at this point, and so it's just investing the proper resources into the community and moving away from that institutional model. And this is something that's been going on not only in Virginia but nationwide for the last 60 years now, as we've been systematically shutting down hospitals and trying to move all the services into community-based services. Both the Senate and the House budget, I've had the chance to look over both of the HHR sections that have the mental health funding in it. We've made a lot of good investments in PAC teams, drop-off centers, children's services, and both of them are within the same realm. And so I think whatever comes out of the conference that should have been adopted by this point when it's on air is going to be good overall for everybody.
Now, our viewers may not know what PAC teams are.
So PAC teams it's a very interesting model. It's an evidence-based program. It stands for Program for Assertive Community Treatment. And this is a specialized team of individuals that consist of case manager, psychiatrists, nurses that have a caseload of individuals who have a serious mental illness. And really what PAC teams are trying to accomplish is to keep the individual out of the hospital. And so it's a very intensive treatment program. They will go to the individual's homes if necessary to deliver and administer medications, take them to appointments, whether it's at the CSB or some other medical appointment. And so it's a very hands-on approach to work with somebody who has a serious mental illness. The neat thing about PAC teams is it is evidence-based. It's shown to work. 90% of individuals who are receiving services through a PAC team never go back to a hospital, if they've had involvement in the justice system, never have involvement in the justice system before, and it really does keep them in the community. We have 22 PAC teams in the Commonwealth currently. The House budget had funding to add 2 additional ones, and the Senate had funding to add 3 additional ones. So we have 40 CSBs in Virginia, so over half of our CSBs have functional PAC teams, which I think probably my goal would be, and I'm sure Senator Barker would agree, to try to get all CSBs to have a situation where there's PAC teams available.
Now, the larger community services boards have them by and large now. Some of the smaller population areas don't, and part of what we need to do is get this a service that's provided statewide, because it really works.
Mm-hmm.
So you have them in Northern Virginia.
Yes.
And
we have them in the New River Valley.
In your River Valley too. So they're housed in the CSB or
the Community Services Board of the 40 of those, as Delegate Yost said, around the state, and they're housed there. And what they do is bring a number of people together to collectively work with the individuals who have serious mental illness, a chronic mental health problem that they need support and assistance to be able to deal with. And one of the other things that is working very well now is having peer support. Mm-hmm. So it's people who have had a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue in the past, and they often relate very well to the individuals who are having problems at the current time, and help them sort of stabilize their life and understand what they need to do, how to be able to handle situations when they go into crisis or get into a situation where severe depression or substance use that they hadn't been experiencing for a long time comes up, and help them intervene quickly and get those situations resolved.
Oh, I'm sure that this is the humane thing to do. Is it also in some ways cost effective to do this early intervention?
Oh, by and large, it is definitely cost effective. I mean, you look at the cost for institutionalizing somebody versus keeping them in the community. I think one of the things that I struggle with in the House, and probably they struggle the same thing in the Senate with, is it does cost maybe some extra dollars up front to get the PAC teams going.
Right.
Because front-end services like this can be more expensive in the front end, but in the long run, if you're reducing that hospitalization and they're not cycling back and forth out of the system, or they're not cycling forth out of jails and emergency departments and emergency rooms, you're really going to save what you invested up front, probably times 10 down the road, because it's a much more stable environment for the individual.
Yeah, another benefit you get out of it, which is a major cost benefit, but also a societal benefit. You help these people have functioning lives, so that they can hold on to a job, that type of thing. One of the issues that a lot of people with serious mental illness or major substance abuse problem is that they get a job and then they have a crisis and they lose the job. Sometimes they quit, sometimes they get fired, that type of thing. If you can sort of build some stability into their lives, in many instances they can be productive, functioning members of society who can get and keep a job. And that helps all of us. It obviously helps them, but it helps society at large when they're not just continually having these crises and problems.
At some point in time, everyone has some health care issues and problems. I'm amazed, and I don't have the figures, and you may or may not, but the percentage of us who at some time will need some mental health services is really significant.
Well, and I think that's why mental health issues are such an important topic. Obviously, it's not per se as sexy a topic as, you know, education or public safety or some other topic like that. But when you look at just the raw data on mental health problems in our society, 25% of the population at some point will struggle with a mental health problem. And we're not saying 25% of the population, you know, has schizophrenia or bipolar disorder.
Yes.
We're talking about a continuum from, you know, mild depression, generalized anxiety disorder, all the way up to, you know, a major spectrum disorder like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So I guarantee you, you know, everybody knows somebody with a mental health problem. Whether they know it or not, they know somebody. And it is an important issue because, you know, as a society, I think to truly address what's going on in our mental health system, we're going to have to get to a point where we recognize that having a mental health problem is just like having any other healthcare issue. It's like having diabetes or cancer. It's an illness, it's treatable, and you can achieve long-term recovery and success even if you have a mental health problem.
I think one of the major things that we're making some progress on, it used to be that even when the people had a mental health problem, they were reticent to get treatment because they saw that as a failing within themselves. And they didn't want other people to know that they had, you know, that type of thing because it was, historically, it's often been perceived as a character flaw. You know, there's something wrong with you as a person, not that you have an illness. And I think there's greater recognition and acceptance now that this is an illness, and it's treatable, as Delegate Yost said, and it's something that we need to get ahead of rather than letting it get to the point where someone is really debilitated by it and has major problems because they didn't get treatment or we didn't provide them that treatment earlier.
And am I thinking about having the two of you on the show and talk about mental health issues? It brought back to mind something I hadn't thought about in a long time, and that was as a youngster walking to elementary school in eastern Kentucky. We walked past a place where there was a cinder block building out behind the house, and someone in that building had some serious mental illness, or we're not sure what all it was, but you would hear screams oftentimes as you would pass there, and people talked about it. But it wasn't, not even any treatment. So maybe they'd sought treatment and they couldn't get it. I'm not sure what the situation was, but I'm thinking about the difference that there is now in mental health issues and severe retardation, or however you would describe issues, being addressed instead of just families trying to hide them away.
Right.
Major difference.
Well, and I think that's where we're headed as a society. But, you know, you talk about youngsters. I think one of the things that the Commonwealth is moving towards, and something I've been trying to push them towards, you know, as part of the Deeds Commission over the last 2 years, is to really look at the children's aspect of mental health issues. Because if we can provide that early identification, early intervention services, you know, to individuals, you know, then we can, you know, hopefully get them on a track where they're never going to have involvement in the justice system. You know, hopefully they'll never have, you know, repeat hospitalizations. You know, we can get them into services early on, make that identification. You know, both budgets that we talked about earlier, you know, include monies for additional children's psychiatric and crisis services. You know, I had a bill last year that's part of a 2-year study right now through the Department of Behavioral Health and Department of Education to do mental health screenings on children in their schools. We do vision screenings, we do hearing screenings, we do scoliosis screenings, asthma screenings. You know, put this opportunity out there, you know, provide an instrument and see if we can provide that early identification, you know, and if something pops up, you know, we can get them into services that they need.
Well, one of the things that I've gotten into the Senate budget this year is funding for a program to enhance collaboration between pediatricians and mental health professionals.
Yes.
And one of the things, you know, because fits with what Delegate Yost was talking about, if a child is seen by a pediatrician and they have looks like a heart problem, they'll refer them to a pediatric cardiologist. If it appears though there may be some behavioral issue, a lot of times, you know, they're a little reticent to do it, you know, not sure how the family's going to react and everything. And if they're not referring many, they may not know quite who in the community to make that referral to. So what we're trying to do is set up some collaboration, which has been done in some other states, and actually it was just a whole program that's been set up now in the District of Columbia, near my area, where you have the pediatricians and the mental health professionals working together. That has been shown to be extraordinarily successful, and actually we've done some stuff with that, not just with children, but with adults as well, in a community health center that I run. And we have the primary care physicians, both pediatricians and family practitioners, do screenings on a periodic basis for the people who we're treating. And if there is a depression issue and they get a score of a certain amount, they're then referred directly to the behavioral health staff, which we also have. That helps greatly having that staff within the same center there, and enhances collaboration, and we've been able to help a lot of people. It's been extraordinarily successful.
Now, you both have mentioned the budget, and of course we know that the final action of the budget will occur when you return for a reconvene day and see what the governor is proposing that you consider at that time. But I think I've heard you both say that each chamber has been adding some funds for mental health issues even beyond the governor's introduced budget. Would that be a correct statement? Because I know there certainly was some significant amount in the budget as introduced.
There was a good bit that was introduced, but certainly we have both the House and the Senate have added some funds for these types of things. We had to work hard to do it because neither the House nor the Senate put a Medicaid expansion or anything like that in the budget. So we actually had to add back into the budget a lot of things that we would not have had to fund separately if we'd had Medicaid expansion. So there were cuts in a number of other areas to provide us the resources to enhance some of these needed services. And I think we're certainly moving in the same direction. Actually, last year, I think on the budget, the governor did not offer a single amendment. And he said, well, I could, but he thought that the House and the Senate, the Republicans and Democrats, have worked together very well to come up with a budget that changed some things from what he had been proposing. So he didn't get everything he wanted, but he said that's part of politics. When you work together, you got to listen to each other and work with each other. And he thought both sides had done a good job. So he said, rather than putting in a small number of amendments, I'm just going to accept it as is. So it was an unusual thing, but I thought it was a positive step forward in sort of highlighting the collaboration that's going on.
Yeah, I know some of the pundits and those who observe are trying to figure out when's the last time that happened.
Yes,
and I think some went back and back and back and never found a time. I guess you go far enough back and find a time when that did occur, but it had been a long time.
Right.
Well, and I think Richmond we're a little bit different than our friends up the Potomac or up the James or wherever you're headed up north. We do, I think for the most part, work together pretty well. We get along, we collaborate. There's obviously, we do have policy differences. We do have, different philosophical views. But I think at the end of the day, we probably want all the same thing, which is, a good Virginia. And, we had the House budget session this past week. And, it was probably one of the least contentious budget sessions that I've been a part of, before we moved the bill into conference. The budget bill passed out of the House 98-2, I think is what it was. The Senate, I think, was 38-1. And I think that's a testament of, the Finance and the Appropriations Committee working with everybody in the chamber, even those who are not on the committee and across the aisle, trying to get, everybody's perspective built into it and everybody feeling comfortable. Are the documents perfect? No. Are there things that I would like to see in there? Yes. Are there things I don't like? Yes. But, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater moving forward. So,
what about some other issues that you all want to mention? And let me leave them wide open to you. Whether it's education or whether it's some of the compromises on guns and gun safety. And you may have different issues that you'd like to mention. George, we'll start with you again. What's something else that's been really hot that you've been working on during the session?
Well, certainly the gun compromise, I think, was extraordinarily positive step. So I think it actually will save lives, particularly the bills that passed that provide that when there's a protective order that someone has obtained, being able to remove a gun temporarily from someone who is subject to that protective order. And we have over 100 people who are killed every year, even though they've obtained a protective order. And this, I think, will help dramatically in reducing those incidents. So I think those types of things are very positive and certainly took care of concerns that people had about the concealed carry permits. Because concerned about what would happen to people from other states who had a concealed carry permit, as well as to what would happen to Virginians who have a concealed carry permit when they went to some other state. And I think we've taken action to resolve that. Certainly the data show pretty clearly, the people who have concealed carry permits, by and large, are very unlikely to commit crimes with using a gun. And actually, they could not find an incident where someone with a concealed carry permit from another state had come into Virginia to commit a crime. So I think the gun thing was very good. The other thing I think is highly significant this year is what we've done on economic development. We didn't fund everything the governor wanted on that, and we didn't fund everything we did fund. Some of those that we did fund, we reduced the amount because we had to be able to balance the budget. But I think that will help us tremendously. Virginia for 50 or 60 years was doing great. We were outperforming the national economy in terms of our economic growth and become one of the top states. And then sequestration hit us in 2013. And suddenly we were one of 3 states where we lost jobs and our economy went south, while the other 47 states were moving forward. And we finally decided, okay, we got to get serious about this and work with the private sector to move things forward. We've done that with regional programs that were funded this year, as well as some state initiatives and research and development and those types of things. I think that will help us tremendously over time.
And I have to agree with the Senator. I mean, I think the gun compromise was something that was truly historic and definitely a bipartisan initiative. Prior to Christmas, when the Attorney General issued his ruling about reciprocity, that was a big deal. I represent a border district that borders between West Virginia and Virginia, as do a lot of my colleagues in Southwest with Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and particularly those in deep Southwest in the Bristol area. That was going to be a big problem. Bristol split right down the middle between Virginia and Tennessee. And Tennessee had already said, we won't recognize Virginia concealed carry permits if you don't recognize ours. Well, then all of a sudden you're in a catch-22. You have a law-abiding gun owner with a concealed carry permit, never a problem in the world. He crosses a state line, which is literally Main Street in Bristol, and all of a sudden he's committing a crime. And so that's definitely a problem. We got probably more communication through emails, letters, phone calls, people walking into my office prior to session on that one issue than I think that anything else that I had seen in the prior 5 years. And so the fact that we were able to come together, both sides, sort of got what they wanted. Not everybody got everything they wanted, but I think it's a testament to how we can work together. What
about education? What's your perspectives on what's happened in the arena of education this session?
Well, I think if you look at both budgets, I think there's some good dollars in there for education. The thing that I'm most excited about is restoring the ability for a big amount of the lottery proceeds to go towards education. And I think the best part of that is there's not a lot of strings attached, which is what you hear from a lot of local governments and school boards is, we'll give you the money, but you got to do X, Y, and Z before you can do it or whatnot. And so that's obviously a big deal for a lot of folks. We really have tried to make more investments in education in the last couple of years because, we did have the recession in the Commonwealth. Another big area of interest is always SOLs. I think, hold the distinction of being the only member of the legislature to take an SOL test.
And did you pass?
I did. I passed all my SOLs. So, but those are obviously some very complicated issues because you want to make sure you have standards and accountability. But I think there becomes a time when you have too much standards and accountability. When teachers are teaching to the test, students are losing the ability to think critically and everything.
And I think we've had significant problems since about 2008. Between 2004 and 2008, we significantly increased our funding for education to take care of some shortages that we'd really had previously. Over the last 8 years, from 2008 to now 2016, in terms of per pupil funding adjusted for inflation, we've had substantial cuts in our overall funding for education. And it is really stretching the ability of a lot of school systems. I represent 3 different jurisdictions in Northern Virginia: Alexandria, Fairfax, and Prince William. And I think a lot of people from other parts of the state say, oh, well, your schools have to be perfect. They should be fine. There shouldn't be any problem there. In reality, Prince William has by far the largest class sizes of any school system in the entire Commonwealth. It's 35% more students per teacher in Prince William than the average statewide. And so we do have some major challenges. There are major concerns of advocates and parents in Fairfax County this year about potentially large cuts coming to the Fairfax County school system this year. So we do need to, to work harder at it. We made some restoration this year that will help a little bit, but we still have a long ways to go on things.
I want to thank you, Senator Barker and Delegate Yost, both of you for being on This Week in Richmond. We look forward to having a conversation with you later this year. Thank you both. Thank you both very much.
Glad to be here.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.